Honourable members, we have some special guests in the gallery this morning. We've got students from the Holy Spirit Catholic Primary School, Year 5 and 6, and we welcome you and hope you enjoy your time in Parliament House this morning. Any more speakers? Member for Berkeley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I rise to speak in support of the ministerial report this morning by the Treasurer. Certainly the federal budget handed down overnight is clearly a slap in the face for Territorians. We know that there's many issues right across the Northern Territory, and I'll pick up on the member for Nelson, and I'll just quickly touch on roads before I move to talk about some of the issues with the lack of investment in health here in the Northern Territory from the federal government. But Madam Speaker, roads, to see $200 odd million in the budget for part of the Stuart Highway. We do know that the Stuart Highway, the Berkeley Highway in my electorate, the Victoria Highway, but roads right across the Berkeley, Madam Speaker, many of which are unsealed roads, require significant investment from the federal government. We do know that particularly the Tablelands Highway, the Berkeley Highway, the Sandover Highway, the Murray Downs Road, all of those roads require significant investment. I do want to mention that there is over $160 million going into investment in the Carpentaria Highway, but that money was put forward by the Coalition around about 3 years ago. So I do want to commend the Coalition who invested that money just prior to the previous election in May 2022. So that investment is going ahead on the Carpentaria Highway, and it's I think it's roughly about 90 kilometres of bitumen that now has been laid. But Madam Speaker, when we talk about roads, our roads are of strategic importance and really can unlock economic opportunities. It improves safety, but it also ensures efficient transport of goods and services here in the Northern Territory. The member for Nelson spoke about the cattle industry. Pastoralists constantly transporting cattle, and just the condition of the Tablelands Highway is absolutely atrocious. I do know the Sandover Highway is that cattle producers are actually taking a long way around. They can't get across the Sandover into Queensland because of the lack of investment in our roads. But it's the importance of getting the roads right is we face in the Northern Territory challenges of frequent natural disasters, extreme weather events, and federal investment is really needed to ensure that there's a focus on resilience and capacity building initiatives to prepare and mitigate for these important weather events that often impact on roads, but also puts lives and property at risk all of the time through these weather events. So it's very disappointing to see that very little investment when it comes to roads and building up that resilience that we need to be able to keep roads open. We did see, I think last year and the year before, significant weather events which closed the Stuart Highway in a couple of areas. So the lack of investment in the main arterial road here in the Northern Territory is really noticeable. So there needs to be more investment in the Stuart Highway, the Berkeley Highway, the Victoria Highway, but significant investment in key roads in my electorate in the Berkeley. So very disappointing to see the lack of investment there. But Madam Speaker, also in the Berkeley, I just want to remind people that the Berkeley Regional Deal was signed on the 13th of April back in 2019. So we're talking nearly 5 years ago. When I talk about roads and weather events, one of the critical pieces of infrastructure that still hasn't been delivered, and I'd have to go back to the federal budget just to see if there is any investment. If there is, it must be hidden away in a line item somewhere. But 17.8 million, I think, was earmarked to deliver a weather radar in the Berkeley 5 years ago, and that still hasn't been delivered by the federal government. So This is of critical concern to not only pastoralists but to our emergency services, Aboriginal people living in remote areas, people living in remote areas, business people. This weather radar is a critical piece of infrastructure that must be delivered in Tennant Creek. It's a critical piece of infrastructure. It gives the ability to people to check the radar before they leave Tennant Creek. It impacts on the ability for contractors to get out to various places to deliver services. So that piece of infrastructure, I do urge the federal government to ensure that that investment is still going ahead. But when it comes to health, Madam Speaker, it is important that I remind people that the Northern Territory is the most underfunded part of Australia when it comes to delivering health services. And if we go back to a national cabinet decision back on the 6th of December 23, the federal government indicated that through the Commonwealth contribution rate that every state and territory would eventually get to a 42.5% of the Commonwealth funding pool. But at the moment, we are significantly behind. We're the lowest in Australia, and in fact we only receive 31.8% of the Commonwealth contribution rate for overall funding. So this makes it extremely difficult to deliver services when it comes to health. One of the things that I do briefly want to talk about is not only the fact that we're significantly underfunded, but the inequity that we face when it comes to Commonwealth funding. For example, Madam Speaker, in Australia, the Commonwealth provide funding for aeromedical retrieval services across other jurisdictions, including Central Australia. However, they don't provide any funding for aeromedical services in the top end where we are speaking today. So basically, from Elliott upwards, the Northern Territory government is funding aeromedical retrieval services, and at the moment, approximately around about 40 million per annum is paid to Careflight to deliver this service here in the Northern Territory. But I do have a map in front of me, and it just shows that all of those retrieval services are funded everywhere across the nation, except for this small portion in the top end, Madam Speaker. So that's just one example of where the Northern Territory is paying for a service that is funded by the Commonwealth in every part of Australia, except for the top end here in the Northern Territory. Madam Speaker, it was disappointing to see that, and I spoke yesterday about this, that the Northern Territory has been working diligently with the federal government to try and trying to get an investment of $120 million to invest in aged care here in the Northern Territory. It's disappointing. I'm hoping that negotiations can continue, and I hope they are continuing, but there's no line item in the budget to indicate that there's $120 million to deliver an aged care facility here in the Northern Territory. So that, from a health perspective, we are still seeing 60 to 80 aged care patients taking up beds in the hospital and being cared for by health services here in the Northern Territory. So it is very disappointing to see that that $120 million hasn't featured in the budget. Yesterday I did mention that the Labor federal government promised back in 26th of April 2022 to deliver 500 new First Nations medical trainees, 30 new renal clinics, and they said that they would double the funding for rheumatic heart disease. Now, Territorians have been waiting nearly 3 years for that funding to be delivered. So, as I said yesterday, it's difficult to have any trust in our federal politicians here in the Northern Territory. We've got the member for Lingiari, we've got Malanderi McCarthy as the senator, Luke Gosling, the member for Solomon. No investment in aged care, a promise made nearly 3 years ago to double funding for rheumatic heart disease and invest in 30 renal clinics here in the Northern Territory. Renal disease here in the Northern Territory has reached crisis point. That's the situation that we face here in the Northern Territory. All of these empty promises by the federal government to try and deliver additional services and funding and infrastructure to tackle some of the serious health problems that we face have been completely ignored by the federal government in this budget. Thank you, Madam Speaker.